Ask any podcaster out there. Most of them will tell you, you know what? I think I have a marketing problem with my podcast. People just aren't clicking. I don't know what it is. My promotion efforts aren't working. But more often than not, it's not a marketing problem at all. It's a messaging problem. And it starts with your episode titles. And the longer that you misdiagnose this problem, the longer your podcast is going to stay invisible, while someone with half your expertise is getting all the clicks out there from your dream listeners. So inside of this Fix My Pod coaching session, I'm helping Jennifer spot why her dream listeners weren't hitting play on her show and how a few very small, very simple title tweaks can help your podcast get discovered, clicked on, and actually listened to. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yes, I am so excited to dig into your podcast. When I learned a little bit about you and what you do and what you're all about, I'm like, this is such a cool topic. So for those listening right now, tell us a little bit about what your show is and who it's for.
My show is Family TV Uncovered, and it's about helping busy moms and maybe even dads who are tired of modern TV options and looking at Google and Reddit and other threads for TV recommendations of shows to watch with their families. And since I grew up, as I'm going to unashamedly say, I was a TV addict when I was a child. And that was when TV was at its pinnacle, in my opinion. And I wanted to share my knowledge of the greatest TV shows that I grew up with those families, because I know families don't have time to vet everything. And I've grown up watching these shows hundreds of times, and I still watch them with my own children. And my ideal listener are obviously busy moms. Maybe they're nostalgic. Maybe they grew up like me on some shows like Little House on the Prairie or Family Ties, and they're tired of modern stuff and tired of scrolling through everything and just want trustworthy, wholesome entertainment that aligns with their family values.
I love this. You're speaking to my heart right now because I have a 7-year-old son. And I'm curious to know, tell me a little bit about some of the challenges you feel like you're running into with your show right now.
Discoverability and episode titles. I've listened to your podcast, your tips. I've also done some other research with other podcasters like Pat Flynn and other ones. And my episode titles, I'm always going back and forth. I think I've changed them like half a dozen times. I don't know whether to keep the show title name in the episode title or keep them a mystery to make people curious and to click on the episode. Because I know with SEO and discoverability, having the show title in the episode name would help with that. But on the other hand, I think, well, if I'm somebody that's never seen it before, and I have 2 episodes that have the name of the movie and the show in them, and people are like, oh, I already know about that. I don't want to hear about that. And they might not click. So that's one thing. And then again, with discoverability, because my downloads are in that less than 20 or so. So I'm right there. And I'd like to grow it more. So those are the issues that I'm having.
Okay. And I know you've told me you've had your podcast for 2 months and you've made it the goal to just stick with it for a year, which I think is so key. It's so spot on because it does take time. However, during that year, what I want you to be thinking about for your podcast is this is the time to really figure out what your core message is and how it's differentiated from other podcasts that are maybe offering something similar. Have you done any research, just even out of curiosity, like on Apple or Spotify, looking to see what other podcasts that might be kind of similar to yours are offering?
Yes, I did a lot of that before I started the podcast, thanks to your tips. My biggest thing that I noticed is that a lot of them are 2 people. There are more 2 people conversation type versus solo podcasters. That's one. The other thing is a lot of them have the explicit warnings. And I wanted to do something that was clean and doesn't have anything explicit. So in case a teenager or a tween happens to listen to my podcast, they're not going to get anything inappropriate.
Okay, I love this. And I love that you're thinking about this already because really, and for everyone listening right now, there's 5 different ways that we can differentiate a podcast. We can look at the actual content itself, which you're doing. You're like, a lot of the shows out there are like interview shows or it's 2 people talking, they're co-hosted or whatnot. This is solo. We can look at the messaging and the positioning. And when I typed in, I was like, what would a listener who would probably want to listen to Jennifer's podcast, what would they type in? So immediately I'm like thinking in my mind, family movie night. There's like 5 podcasts with literally that name. So it's like when you see something like that, that's a red flag. And we want to make sure that even if your podcast is covering a similar topic, we don't want it in a listener's mind to get lumped in with all those same podcasts, right? That are like very, very similar. So we want it to stand out from like messaging, positioning. There's also the format and the structure, the length. Those are all ways that we can differentiate a podcast. Also the editing and the production. So like the fact that yours is clean and others have like the explicit warning. So that's another thing there. And then the brand and the personality of the host. So I'm saying this all just for context for everyone listening right now, because these are all different levers that we can pull to actually further differentiate a show. So there's a couple things that are coming to mind for me. We're going to dig into episode titles, but I want to back up one step before that and actually look at even the name of your podcast, which is great. And it is geared towards like family shows and these movies that families could literally sit down and like have a movie night. The one thing though that you said to me a moment ago that really jumped out is wholesome and timeless values, like that is really the listener we're looking to attract, because having a family movie night can be a little bit subjective in that some families aren't looking necessarily for values-based movies, but your listeners are, it sounds like. That is something we can look at both from an SEO perspective, but also from a who are we looking to attract perspective. We want to make sure that we're thinking about our listeners' intent when they're searching for a podcast, because they're going to the app. They don't know you yet. They don't know your show exists, but they're curious to see if a show exists on maybe some family movie recommendations beyond what they're finding on Google and Reddit and places like that. And then that is what we can then tap into for a podcast name for sure, but also in your episode titles, because these are all connected to Apple and Spotify search algorithms. And so that's going to be really key. But first, focusing on the name of your podcast. So are you married to that name? Would you be open to changing it if it helped you connect with more of your ideal listener? Tell me how you're feeling about that.
I'm flexible. I'm open to changing it. And in fact, I was looking at possibly rebranding it already since I'm kind of unknown. And I thought, no, I'll just wait until I see what Courtney has to say first.
Yes. And when it comes to rebranding, there's a lot of things we want to look at, and I'm not just going to like make an off the wall like recommendation or anything. Like there's deeper stuff we want to dig into. We want to see that alignment with who you're looking to attract. We want to make sure it's positioning and it's differentiation, like that those things are standing out. And sometimes that will inform whether or not the name should be different. Sometimes it's, search engine, and we're looking at that angle of it, so there's a lot of different things we want to consider. But when I'm thinking about, me being the mom of a 7-year-old son, first of all, what would I be typing into if I'm looking for that podcast? And then secondly, how would I know that that podcast is for me? Meaning, when I see family movie night, again, that's subjective. That can mean anything to anyone. But if I saw something like the most wholesome family movie reviews of all time, well, that would tell me that that's for me, right? And I'm not saying that necessarily is the title, but in that direction, focusing on like these keywords like values or timeless or wholesome. So we want that to be evident in the name. So that'll be some homework for you to think about is search intent for your listener. What are they searching? And then also, how am I communicating in the actual name of my podcast that this is for the person who really cares that the family movies are clean, they're wholesome, and that they teach good values? Because we want to make sure we're attracting that right listener. This is also going to play out in your episode titles though, too. So tell me a little bit about your episode titles right now. It sounds like you're experimenting with some different things. So what have been some of those things you've been experimenting with so far?
One, I wanted to thank you for your Bingeworthy episode cheat sheet, because I did buy that and I've been using that as my template.
Love it. We can link to that in the show notes too for anyone listening who's like, ooh, what is that? And can I get one?
Yes, it's great. I highly recommend it. My episode titles, for example, one of my top 3 episodes is one about the classic Lassie back in the black and white days. And it's actually a very popular Google search term. And it's actually what's bringing traffic to my website as well, is Lassie. And I originally had titled it like, this iconic 50s TV show is perfect for dog-loving families. And it was pretty good. And then it reached a plateau. And then I changed it to why families are still loving loving Lassie, I think is what I named it. So, but then I went back to it because it wasn't doing anything. So I'm just struggling going back and forth. And another one of my top episodes is Need a Feel-Good Family Show Tonight, Stream the Torkelsons for free. And that's my highest one. I think it has 25 downloads. So I'm still trying to figure this out. And it's been very confusing for me in trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And that's totally normal, especially in the beginning where it's like you want people to find it. So you want to make sure you're doing it well and you're optimizing so that someone can find it. And so a lot of times that can kind of back us into a corner a little bit in terms of our thinking. And I'm totally guilty of this in the early days of my podcast and like email subject lines and all of it, where it's like, okay, if I get it wrong, then not many people are going to listen, or not as many people could have opened that email, right, as they could have. So I want to make sure I get it right. And then we can kind of get into this like black and white kind of thinking where it's either right or it's not. And then that can cause us to overthink it. And then we can change it. And then it's like, well, it's working, but it's not working. But then I actually don't even know if the title's working or if it's the title at all, right? And then we kind of just like spiral. It's normal, totally normal. And I'm sure people are nodding along right now as well. Like, yep, that's me. So what I would recommend for episode titles, there's something that we always want to make sure that we're including in episode titles. And that is the external payoff of listening to that episode. So what do I mean by that? So the external payoff, there's always reasons why we're motivated to do something. There's that inner motivation, and then there's that external motivation. And so the external payoff really is the, what am I going to get out of this episode? And then the internal payoff is what happens when you get the external payoff. So let me give you an example. We have a client right now she's rebranding her podcast, and it's for women who are in like leadership roles and who are leading teams. And so she's like, they'll be able to lead and feel calm. They'll be able to feel confident. They'll be able to trust themselves and like trust their voice and all this. And I'm like, great. Those are all internal payoffs. What's the external payoff? So she kind of started thinking about it. And she's like, okay, the external payoff is like, they'll have less drama on their team and their teams will work together and it'll be a more enjoyable work environment, right? I'm like, okay, now we're getting somewhere where it's like, what is that external payoff? So when you mentioned the one, need a feel-good family movie for tonight, it's like, that's an immediate payoff where it's like, here's a recommendation I'm giving you that you can literally watch tonight and you can stream it for free. So you see how that external payoff is like really clear. Deeper than that, they're experiencing this yearning to have this bonding time with their family. And the deeper problem is kind of a lack of time with their family, or maybe a lack of connection or a lack of things to bond over. Maybe they're wanting to start, a Saturday night movie tradition or something, right? That value matters to them, spending that quality time. And so that's the internal payoff or the transformation that happens when the external problem is solved. And so that's really important. When we can speak to how we help them solve the external problem, which helps them achieve the internal payoff, it comes full circle.
Wow. Boy, I'm glad I mentioned that because you just helped clarify things even more for me.
Yes. Good. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up too, because that is really important.
I guess my other concern was like, are my titles getting too long? That was the other thing I was worrying about.
Yes. Shorter is better in that we want to make sure, specificity, clarity, and brevity is like the perfect storm. When we can be specific, clear, and succinct, then it's a lot easier for the listener's brain to process. And when they don't have to think about something, then they're more likely to click because we're not making them work too hard. And think about your own user behavior. If you're going through a podcast and it's like, I don't know, think about my show. And if I have like some really long title about like, the psychology behind, why listeners click play on this episode versus other episodes. And like, I don't know, it was some long-winded title and it wasn't really clear what the payoff was. And you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, Courtney, so therefore I'm just going to look for another episode. That actually makes sense to me. So we just have to always be putting ourselves in our listeners' shoes and thinking about when they're scrolling through something, they've got a million things on their mind. They're probably busy. They're looking for something specific. And in this case, I think your ideal listener will be looking, when it's like, what can we watch tonight? What can we watch this weekend? And they may find your show through a search first, and then discover, oh my gosh, Jennifer has this incredible podcast. Now I want to listen to more of her episodes. So the more we can tap into that as well in episode titles, the more that we can optimize their ability to find it in search to lead them back to your podcast.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed too that makes me different, because it's about the angle, is that a lot of these TV reviews are lengthy. They're like 30 minutes to an hour, where I'm trying to make it 10 minutes or less.
Yes. Okay. And so this is really good too, because this is another differentiator that you can lean into.
Yes.
And, if we can angle, because you're right, it is about the angle. And that's really all this is. And once we can figure out what that angle is, then you're going to be able to get on a roll with this. So, if you've got like this last episode you put out was 5 minutes, but I may be looking at the title and I might not even notice the length of the episode. Positioning the title as how I'm saving you time by learning about this movie before you sit down for an hour and a half and watch it with your family, right? That wouldn't be the title, but that's what we're communicating through the title. And so, as a busy parent, I think you're really onto something there. I don't necessarily want to listen to a 30-minute episode of a movie just to be able to watch the movie. I would just like to know what values are being taught. Is this movie clean? What are some of the things I can expect from this movie? Maybe what are some of the talking points I could have with my family after this movie? And that's it. Okay, great. So I think the title that you had about the original one about for families who love dogs, or for families who love cooking, or for families who love XYZ, that could be another something to play with in your titles as well, because now you're calling out specific aspects of the people who are clicking through. And, when they start getting used to the fact that your episodes are short, they've got clear takeaways, they can kind of listen to get a quick overview of what's in that movie before committing to that movie. They'll feel a lot better about committing to that movie. And that payoff is really clear in the title for them.
I got it. Okay. What about episodes? I have some episodes where I developed this thing that I call a pause and preview guide, where there are some things that have what I consider questionable content. And I include links to download where I already have the time codes and what each scene may be appropriate. So it's like a warning. So it's for the parent to download, look at it if they even want to watch it, or they can skip through it. So for episodes where I have a download guide, should I include that in the title or not?
So that's another thing that we can look at, which is, if you have recurring segments, or like for this one, pause and preview, or, parental control is not the word I'm looking for, right? But it's like, that's what came to mind, like what's on the TV where you're like, yeah, the parental controls are on, or it's like something like that that's really catchy that people would immediately get, oh, that's what this is about. Okay, great. And then they start to see that consistently in your podcast over time. Then they, repeat listeners will begin to understand, oh, I like to tune into these particular segments when Jennifer drops these, because that she's going to give me that information. And that's another differentiator as well, with different segments or different things that you're talking about. So I think you've got a lot going really well for you in terms of your content, right? Because you're angling it for that busy mom. Your episodes are short. You're giving them really actionable takeaways. You're tying things into the values and stuff that they're going to get. And so now we just need to connect the dot on the front end for your listener, starting with the podcast itself and the name itself, so that we know we're attracting that person who ultimately values having family values in the movies, but then also so that the payoff of the episodes is clear. Because again, remember, for your busy mom or busy parent who's scrolling through, they're just looking for something to know, like, is this movie okay? And so the more that you can have that really kind of front and center in your episode titles, the more clicks you're going to get.
Okay.
And I think the biggest one for you, thinking about what are people searching, and you can utilize search tools for this as well, like Google Keyword Planner and different, keyword tools. What are people already searching on Google and other search engines? Because if they're looking for family movies to watch tonight, and we want them to stumble upon your podcast in a Google search, which ironically is how you found my podcast. And so if we know that that could be an entry point into your podcast, then we want to make sure we're tapping into that as well. Because I think for you, people are going to be less likely to find a show like yours just by looking in the Apple and Spotify apps. They might. But I think they'd probably go to Google first to type in like family movies to watch tonight.
Yes, I've done that search myself. That makes sense. Yeah, I just have this passion for this. I've always had it growing up. And the weird thing too, how my life has come full circle, is because I grew up watching all of these things. And then eventually after college, I actually made a career out of it, because I have this history of working with CBS and on the radio with 2 major LA radio stations, where I actually ended up meeting a lot of these actors and stuff on these shows that I grew up watching all my life. And so it's pretty funny how my life has come full circle with that.
That's amazing. Well, I can just see through your content how passionate you are about this. And I think it takes someone like you, like who really cares about this, and that there are other people out there who care too, but they just don't have the time to go and research the movies themselves. Like, you are solving a real problem for people and you're filling a big need. And I think that right there is what we need as a foundation for a podcast. And you've got that because you're clear on the problem that you solve. Really, I think at this point, it's honestly just a matter of connecting the dots for the listener in those early stages of them meeting you, discovering you through your podcast before they listen to your episode. You've heard me talk about those content gatekeepers. That's where we really want to dial in the payoff for them. from your show title and then to your episode titles. Because if we can get them to click through the show title, and that title is really clear and it's attracting the right person, they'll click in and then they'll see your episode titles. And if those payoffs are really clear, that will get them to click into and then hit play on that episode and give the episode a chance. And then if your episodes are short and they deliver and they're really actionable, which it sounds like for the most part that they are and that you're already doing, then that will train them to come back. Because like, oh my gosh, Jennifer really does know what she's talking about. Like, she's done this research for me. That was exactly what I needed to know. So now I can go watch this movie with my family and enjoy that time, right? And they get that kind of internal payoff, that quality time with their family as a result.
Got it. Quick question, going back to what you were saying about the podcast title, which I'm open to changing. How do I go about finding ways to change that? Because I struggled trying to name what I have it now.
Yes. Well, and I think you're on the right track with, family TV. But again, for your specific listener, I want to make sure that we're really speaking to the person who shares the same values as you do, or similar values, that those things are important to them, right? This timeless, that it's wholesome, that it talks about values and things. So I think that is kind of the next level we want to take it to.
Okay.
So that, and the fact that you're like actually giving them actionable advice to be able to say, yeah, I can watch this movie with my family and here's why. So I think if we can bring those two things to the forefront in your name, you're going to find that you're attracting more the right listener when they discover your show. So there was something you said at the very beginning, and I jotted it down because it stood out, and like the greatest family TV shows of all time, or the greatest family movies of all time. And even, the word wholesome, I think your listener will resonate with that. And this is something that, you can utilize and search, go in Reddit, like go deep in those threads, like see what people are talking about. How are they talking about movies? Are they saying family movies? Are they saying family friendly? Are they saying wholesome? Are they saying movies with values? How are they talking about them? And notice what those words are, because those are the people who would most likely be aligned with the way in which you're presenting this content and the type of movies and things that you're presenting. And so, these words like wholesome or values or things like that might be something we'd want to call to the forefront in the name as well. Because again, it's going to speak to the right listener.
Okay, got it. Boy, this is helpful. I wish I'd had these tips before I launched.
Oh, well, look, you're so early in the game, and this is the beautiful thing. And I want to remind you of this, and I want to remind everyone of this. Messaging takes time. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot you can do on the front end to get it positioned really well and to get that dialed in as clearly as you can so that you can stand out from other people talking about similar stuff. And it's also going to evolve over time. The more that you do what you do, you're going to be having these conversations with people. You're going to be hearing from listeners. You're going to be learning more yourself. And all of that really plays into how we're then communicating. So what I like to think about is understand the principles of messaging, understand the principles of communication, where, like we just talked about, if we can make that external payoff really clear, and if we can make it really clear who it's for. A lot of times people lack clarity on who they're even talking to. You have that clarity. So that's already a step above and beyond what a lot of podcasters, are struggling with right now. So now let's really just tie in how we're communicating to that person so that they know, yeah, this is the show for me. And so my hope is that this has been helpful for you to help just take it to that next step of, the direction of what to focus on, what to test next.
Sounds good. I've got it. Boy, you're just a plethora of information.
Hopefully in a good way.
No, it is. Very, very, very good way.
Good. I'm so glad. Well, let me know how else I can help you. I'm cheering you on. I love that you're doing this. I want to tune into your podcast because this is a problem I have as a mom of a 7-year-old. So thanks for the work that you're doing. And thanks for being here today.
No, thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate this Fix My Pod. I really do. It really helped me. So thank you.
And for you listening right now, there are 3 more things that we did not have a chance to touch on here that you absolutely want to avoid at all costs whenever it comes to your episode titles. I'm going to share with you what those are here in just a second. But before I forget, if you are listening to this and this was helpful for you too, I would love it if you would take a moment to leave a 5-star review on Apple or on Spotify. Either tap the 5 stars, or on Apple, you have the opportunity to write a written review there. Those written reviews, first of all, I read every single one of them that comes through. But more than that, it lets other listeners know that this show is going to be worth their time. So if this was genuinely valuable for you, I would love it if you would take a second and let another listener know that too. And if you want to get in the hot seat with me in a future episode and have me coach you on your podcast, then get on our wait list in the show notes so that you're the first to know as soon as we open up more spots. Okay, so here are those 3 things that I promised you. You just learned how episode titles must have a clear payoff. The promise of your episode has to be clear. But then you have to actually deliver on that promise in your episode. And the quickest way to lose listener trust is to have an episode title that's really strong, but at the end of the day, it's really just clickbait. No clickbait in your episode titles, period. Yes, you can make a strong episode title. Yes, it can have an emotional payoff. Yes, that payoff and promise can be crystal clear, and it should, but your episode also has to deliver. So that's really, really important. There are two other things that undermine your listeners' ability to click into your podcast. And I see this happening all the time. And yes, this is going to be my hill that I will die on. First and foremost, never use colons in your episode titles because they are a super obvious AI tell that says this title was written by a robot. So at the very least, tell GPT not to use colons in your titles, but more importantly, using colons actually separates thoughts. It connects thoughts, but it also separates them. And so it makes the brain work harder than it needs to. And anytime your listener has to think about what you're trying to tell them, it's going to make it harder for them to recognize the payoff of that episode. And it's going to be less likely for them to click because they're skimming, they're just looking really quickly, and their brain is going to naturally gloss over. Because think about your brain. If you see like a really long title and there's a colon right smack in the middle of it, you're probably not going to sit there and try to like really dissect what it means. So clear, short, succinct episode titles with a clear payoff and promise of that episode, and the episode actually delivers, is what you want to do for your titles. And that Bingeworthy cheat sheet that Jennifer mentioned in the episode will help you to do that. The other quick tip for you is never put numbers at the beginning of your episode titles. Now, people push back on me on this because they're like, oh, well, it's easier for people to go back and find old episodes. No. All you have to do is any episode that you mention in your episode, you just say, I'll link to it in the show notes for you. And then you just hyperlink that in the show notes so it makes it easy for someone to click back and go straight to that episode without having to scroll through 200 episodes to find episode 124 that you mentioned in your episode. The bigger reason for this, though, is that numbers take up character space. And when it comes to SEO, you want to have the first 2 to 3 words of your episode title be very keyword friendly whenever possible. So don't waste that character space on numbers. Apple actually automatically numbers your episodes for you. Listeners don't actually need the numbers because there are other workarounds to help them get straight to the episodes that you reference inside of your episodes. And we want to make sure that you are utilizing all that character space to have a clear payoff for your listener and clear signals for SEO so that your episodes can actually get found. But you know what? Speaking of all this stuff, when it comes to episode titles, delivering on its promise and all that kind of stuff, episode titles aren't the only thing that has to deliver on its promise. There's something else that can make or break a listener's trust in you too. And that is whether your guests deliver. If you have a guest-based show and or a hybrid show like me, or sometimes you bring on guests and sometimes it's solo episodes. And in the next episode, I am answering a listener question about how do I know which guests are right for my show? Because I have a hard time saying no because everyone looks great on paper, but inevitably, sometimes you get in the interview with that guest and they are, for lack of a better way of putting it, underwhelming. So I've got the exact answers you need coming up next to help you choose the right guests, gracefully say no to the wrong ones, and help you make your business binge-worthy.